My husband didn't cheat on me in secret. He trained my sister to replace me, in my house, on my couch, using my love story. And then he asked me to stay home while he took her out in public as his wife. But here's what he didn't expect. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to show up with the one person he fears more than losing me. And I was going to destroy him in front of everyone he ever lied to. My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 33, a corporate attorney in Manhattan. People usually describe me as composed. Dark brown hair, always pulled into a low bun. Sharp cheekbones, neutral makeup, tailored suits. I built my life on discipline, control, stability. At least, I thought I did. That night, I came home after a 12-hour day at the firm, heels in hand, shoulders aching, mind still running through contract clauses. I had just been shortlisted for partner, something I'd worked toward for a decade. I hadn't even told Ethan yet. I found him exactly where I expected. Ethan Brooks, my husband, 34. Tall, about 6 feet, with messy, sandy blonde hair and striking blue eyes that used to make people trust him instantly. He had that easy charm, the kind that made strangers like him within minutes. But behind that charm, a pattern, restlessness, entitlement. He hadn't held a steady job in 3 years, drifting from one short-lived position to another, always blaming bad management or toxic environments. Still, I stayed. He was on the couch, scrolling his phone, TV playing something he wasn't watching. "I made pasta," I said, dropping my bag by the door. He replied, not looking up. Of course. I cooked anyway, set the table, poured the wine, played the part. We sat down across from each other like any normal couple, like nothing was already broken. I had just taken my first bite when he said it. "So, my high school reunion is next month," he muttered casually, still staring at his phone. "I'm gonna need Chloe to come with me." I blinked. What? I thought I misheard. Chloe Carter, my younger sister, 28, blonde, effortlessly pretty, the kind of beauty that didn't need effort, soft features, bright eyes, always dressed like she was stepping into a brunch photo. She had a warm laugh, but also a tendency to lean on others, emotionally, financially, constantly figuring things out. For the past 2 years, she'd been living off me. I paid her rent, her car insurance, her groceries. I didn't know I was also funding her appearance as my husband's wife. "Why would Chloe be going with you?" I asked, slowly. Ethan finally looked up, like I was the one being difficult. "Because I need her there." "That doesn't explain anything." He sighed, actually sighed. "Back when we started dating, my friends met Chloe once. They thought she was my girlfriend," he said. "I didn't correct them." I stared at him. "And now," he continued, "they think I married her." Silence. The kind that doesn't feel empty, it feels loud. "So, your solution," I said carefully, "is to take my sister to your reunion and let everyone believe she's your wife?" "It's just one night," he shrugged. "It's easier than explaining. Easier than telling the truth. Easier than acknowledging me." "You want me to stay home," I said, my voice quieter now, "while you take my sister as your wife?" He leaned forward, reaching for my hand like this was normal. "Babe, don't make this a big deal," he said. "These people don't matter." But I did. At least, I thought I did. "And Chloe already said yes," he added. That hit harder than everything else. She what? I asked her earlier, he said, just to make sure. Of course, she said yes. Of course I was the last to know. I sat there, staring at the man I married, realizing something I should have seen years ago. I wasn't his partner. I was his backup plan. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, while Ethan scrolled beside me like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just rewritten our entire marriage in a single sentence. 10 years. 10 years of letting people believe he married my sister. The thought kept looping in my head, sharper each time. Around 2 a.m, I got up, grabbed my phone, and walked into the kitchen. The house felt colder than usual, like it knew something I hadn't wanted to admit. I typed Chloe's name into my messages and stared at our last conversation, me sending her money for groceries, her replying with heart emojis. My chest tightened. The next morning, I called Rachel Bennett, my best friend since law school. Rachel was 34, tall and athletic, with sharp green eyes and short auburn hair she kept tucked behind one ear. She had this blunt, no-nonsense personality, the kind that made partners respect her in court and men slightly afraid of her at dinner parties. She'd grown up in a rough household, an alcoholic father, a mother who worked 3 jobs, and it gave her this instinct to spot dysfunction before anyone else did. "He's lying about something bigger," she said after I told her everything. "Men don't keep a lie like that for 10 years unless it benefits them in ways you don't see yet." I tried to defend Ethan out of habit, but the words sounded weak even to me. Rachel sighed. "Olivia, he's been showing you who he is for years. You just keep rewriting it into something more acceptable." By noon, I found myself dialing my mother. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted reassurance. Maybe I wanted someone to finally take my side. Margaret Carter, my mother, answered on the second ring, her voice warm but distant in that familiar way. She was in her late 50s, always impeccably dressed, soft blonde hair styled perfectly, the kind of woman who cared deeply about appearances. Growing up, she'd always favoured Chloe, not cruelly, but subtly. Chloe was fragile, emotional, needed more support. I was strong, independent, fine on my own. When I explained the situation, there was a pause. Then she laughed lightly. "Oh, Olivia, you're overthinking this. It's just a reunion. Chloe's helping him out." I felt something inside me crack. "Helping him pretend she's his wife?" I asked. My mother sighed. "Men care about image. You know that. Don't make this into a problem when it doesn't have to be." That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a piece falling out of place. I ended the call without arguing. For the first time, I didn't try to convince anyone. Not Rachel, not my mother, not even myself. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and searched Ethan's name. Social media, old photos, tagged posts. It didn't take long. There it was, pictures from years ago, blurry but clear enough. Ethan at a barbecue, his arm around Chloe. Comments underneath. "You two look amazing together. Power couple. Married life suits you." My stomach dropped. He hadn't just lied once. He'd built a narrative, a whole version of his life where I didn't exist. I closed the laptop slowly, my reflection staring back at me from the black screen. For 10 years, I had been the one paying the bills, building the life, holding everything together. And in his version of reality,
I wasn't even part of the story.
I left work early that day, something I hadn't done in years, not even when I was sick. But the thought of what I had seen online kept pulling at me like a loose thread I couldn't ignore. And when I opened the front door, I already knew I wouldn't like what I was about to find. The house was too quiet, in a way that felt intentional, like something was happening just out of sight. And then I heard voices from the living room. Ethan's low and casual, Chloe's softer but animated, almost excited. And I stepped closer without announcing myself, stopping just before they could see me. They were sitting on the couch, closer than they had any right to be, and Ethan was leaning forward, elbows on his knees, focused in a way I hadn't seen him in months. Not with me. Never with me. "Okay, so when they ask how we met," he said, glancing at Chloe, "I'll say I saw you across the room at a birthday party, and I knew I had to talk to you." And my entire body went still, because that was my story. My exact story, word for word, the one I had told Chloe years ago on a quiet night when we were still sisters who trusted each other. Chloe smiled like she was remembering something that had actually happened to her, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, her posture relaxed, natural.
"And I'll say I thought you were arrogant at first," she added lightly, "but charming enough to give you a chance." She laughed softly, and Ethan laughed with her, a genuine laugh, the kind I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. And something inside my chest tightened painfully, because she didn't just know the story. She knew how to wear it, how to make it believable, like she'd been practicing longer than I realized. I stepped into the room then, my heels clicking against the floor, and neither of them looked startled, not really, just mildly interrupted, like I had walked into a meeting I wasn't part of. "Am I interrupting something?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, and Ethan barely glanced at me. "We're just running through details," he said, like it was obvious, like it didn't involve my entire life being rewritten in front of me, and I turned to Chloe. "You remember that story pretty well," I said, and she shrugged casually. "You told me, remember? I just have a good memory," she replied, smiling in a way that felt almost dismissive. Then Ethan leaned back, his expression shifting into something familiar, something I had learned to recognize over the years, irritation disguised as honesty. "See, this is why this works better with Chloe," he said, gesturing toward her. "She's easy. She doesn't overthink everything." And I felt the words land before he finished the sentence. "You're too structured, Liv. It's like everything with you has to be perfect, rehearsed, controlled." He added, his tone almost amused, and Chloe let out a small laugh beside him, not loud, but enough to make it feel like they were on the same side of a joke I wasn't invited to. I stood there, looking at them, really looking this time. The way they leaned toward each other, the way their energy matched, effortless, unforced, while I felt like I had been trying for years to hold something together that only existed because I refused to let it fall apart. And in that moment, it became painfully clear that I had been the one building everything, the one paying, supporting, explaining, forgiving, giving, always giving, while they simply took what was already there and made it their own. My stories, my memories, my marriage. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. I wasn't part of this anymore. I was just the source they were drawing from. I told myself I was imagining things, that what I saw in the living room earlier was just stress,
just my mind trying to connect dots that weren't really there. So I went upstairs, changed out of my work clothes, and stood in front of the mirror longer than I needed to, studying my own reflection like I was trying to remember who I used to be before everything started feeling slightly off. And for a moment, I almost convinced myself to let it go, to be the version of me that kept the peace, the version that didn't ask questions. But then I heard Chloe laugh downstairs again, softer this time, not the loud, carefree laugh she used around me, but something quieter, more intimate, and my body moved before my brain could stop it, carrying me halfway down the staircase where I could see into the living room without being seen. Ethan was standing now, close to her, closer than before, his posture relaxed but focused entirely on Chloe, his hand lifted, fingers brushing lightly against her cheek as if it was the most natural thing in the world. And Chloe didn't pull away. She leaned into it, her eyes half closed, like she knew exactly what that touch meant, like it wasn't new, like it had happened before. And in that moment, something inside me went completely still, not shattered, not broken, just cold, because this wasn't confusion anymore, this wasn't misunderstanding, this was familiarity. And then he tilted his head slightly, moving closer, and she mirrored him, and I knew before it even happened, they were about to kiss. My foot shifted against the wooden step, the smallest sound, but it was enough. They jumped apart instantly, like two people caught doing something they couldn't explain. Ethan's hand dropping too quickly, Chloe stepping back, her face flushing red, and they both started talking at once. "It's not what it looks like," Ethan said, too fast, too rehearsed, and Chloe added, "We were just practicing." Her voice shaky, her hands twisting together like she was trying to look smaller, more innocent. And I walked the rest of the way down slowly, my heartbeat steady in a way that surprised me, like my body had already accepted what my mind was catching up to. "Practicing," I repeated, my voice calm, almost detached. And Ethan exhaled like I was being difficult again, like I was interrupting something inconvenient. "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know, just making it look real, in case people expect affection." He shrugged, like it was logical, like touching her face like that was part of some script they needed to memorize. And Chloe nodded quickly, stepping forward just enough to be seen, but not enough to be blamed. "We have to be believable, Olivia," she said softly, her tone careful, almost pleading. "You're reading too much into it." There it was, the shift, the narrative turning against me. "You're overreacting," Ethan added, his voice firmer now, slipping into something familiar, something controlling. "You always do this, take something small and make it into a problem." He looked at me like I was the one who had crossed a line, not him, not them. And Chloe lowered her gaze, playing her role perfectly, shoulders slightly hunched, lips pressed together like she was trying not to cry. And I almost admired how seamless it was, how easily they fit into those positions, him the reasonable one, her the victim, and me, the unstable one. For a second I considered arguing, listing every detail, every inconsistency, every instinct screaming that what I had just seen wasn't practice, it was habit. But then something unexpected happened. I didn't feel the urge to fight. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. Instead, I felt clarity, sharp and quiet, settling into place like a final piece clicking into a puzzle I hadn't wanted to finish. Because the truth didn't need their confirmation anymore. I had already seen it with my own eyes. "Right," I said finally, nodding once, stepping past them towards the kitchen. "Practice." And I didn't look back, didn't raise my voice, didn't cry, because crying would mean I was still hoping for something to fix, and I wasn't, not anymore. I reached for a glass, poured myself water, my hands steady, my mind already moving somewhere else entirely. Because if they thought I was going to stay in this role, the blind, forgiving wife, then they didn't know me at all. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting. I was thinking, planning, calculating, quietly building something they wouldn't see coming until it was too late. I didn't confront Ethan again that night. Not because I believed him, but because I needed something he couldn't twist, something undeniable. And by the time the house went quiet, I was already grabbing my keys, my phone, and walking out without a word. The cold night air hitting my face as I got into my car, my mind replaying every detail I had ignored for years, every excuse I had made for both of them. And by the time I pulled up in front of Chloe's apartment, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was steady, focused, ready. Chloe lived in a one-bedroom apartment I paid for, a clean, carefully decorated space with neutral tones and soft lighting, the kind of place that looked like stability but wasn't built on her effort. And when she opened the door, her face immediately shifted from surprise to something closer to panic. "Olivia? What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice too high, too forced, and I stepped inside without waiting for permission, my eyes scanning the room, noticing details I hadn't before. A man's jacket draped over a chair, a glass on the counter that wasn't hers. Small things that added up quickly. "How long?" I asked, my voice calm, controlled, and she froze for a second before recovering, crossing her arms like she was protecting herself. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her eyes flicked away from mine, and that was all I needed. "Don't lie to me," I continued, stepping closer. "How long have you been sleeping with Ethan?" The words landed between us, heavy, final. And for a moment she said nothing, just stared at me like she was deciding which version of the truth would cost her less. "You're being dramatic," she said finally, shaking her head. But there was no conviction in it, and I let out a quiet laugh, one that didn't sound like me. "Am I?" I asked, pulling out my phone, scrolling through the numbers I had calculated earlier. 2 years, Chloe," I said, holding the screen up. 2 years of rent, car payments, insurance, groceries, random transfers whenever you said you were struggling. I looked back at her, my expression flat. "Do you know how much that is?" She stayed silent, and I answered for her. "Over $30,000, I said, each word clear, deliberate. "That's how much I paid for your life while you were sleeping with my husband." Her face tightened, guilt flickering for just a second before something else replaced it, something sharper, defensive. "You think that's what this is about?" she shot back, her voice rising. "Money?" She stepped forward now, her posture changing, less victim, more confrontation. "Ethan doesn't even care about your money, Olivia," she said, her lips pressing into a thin line. "He stays because it's easy, because you make everything convenient. But with me?" She paused, a small, almost proud smile appearing. "I make him feel something. I make him feel alive. I'm not boring." The word hung in the air, echoing something Ethan had said before, and for a second, I just looked at her. Really looked at her. This girl I had raised in so many ways. This girl I had protected, supported, believed in. And I realized she wasn't confused. She wasn't manipulated. She had made a choice, fully aware, fully intentional. "Then you can have him," I said simply. And that seemed to catch her off guard more than anger would have. "What?" She blinked, and I stepped back, creating distance, not just physically but emotionally. "If he makes you feel so alive, if you think he's going to choose you, then take him." I shrugged slightly. "But you're not doing it with my money anymore." Her expression changed instantly. panic replacing confidence. "Olivia, wait," she said quickly, following me as I moved toward the door. "You can't just cut me off. I don't have anywhere to go." And I stopped, turning back just enough to meet her eyes. "You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy my marriage," I replied, my voice calm in a way that felt unfamiliar but right. And then I opened the door, stepping out into the hallway without looking back. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying her anymore. Not financially, not emotionally, not at all. And as I walked away, I realized something else just as clearly. The truth hadn't broken me, it had freed me. And whatever came next, it would be on my terms. I didn't go back home right away after leaving Chloe's apartment. I sat in my car for a long time, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at nothing, while everything finally settled into place. The truth, the betrayal, the years I had ignored what was right in front of me, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I felt the urge to end it properly, strategically. And that was when one name came to mind, not out of desperation, but because he was the only person connected to Ethan who had never made me feel invisible. Daniel Brooks. Daniel was Ethan's older brother, 37, taller than Ethan by a few inches, with a lean, athletic build, dark hair always neatly styled, and calm brown eyes that missed nothing. He carried himself with quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need attention to be noticed. He owned a small but successful logistics company he built from scratch after putting himself through college, and unlike Ethan, he didn't talk about what he deserved, he worked for it. I had only seen him at family gatherings over the years, always polite, always respectful, never overstepping. But there was something else too, something subtle. The way he listened when I spoke, the way he remembered small details about my work, my preferences, things Ethan had never bothered to learn. And now, sitting there alone, I realized he might also be the only one who would understand exactly what I was dealing with. I pulled out my phone and found his number, hesitating for a second before typing, "Hi Daniel, it's Olivia. I know this is unexpected, but I need to talk. Can we meet? Please don't tell Ethan." I stared at the message for a few seconds, then hit send before I could second-guess myself. And when his reply came only a minute later, "Of course, tomorrow morning. Coffee?" I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not relief exactly, but stability. Like I had just taken my first step onto solid ground after standing on something fragile for too long. The next morning, I met him at a quiet cafe near my office, the kind of place with soft lighting and minimal noise, and he was already there when I arrived, standing up as soon as he saw me, his expression shifting immediately from neutral to concerned. "Olivia," he said, his voice low and steady. "You don't look okay." And that alone almost broke something in me. Not because of what he said, but because he noticed, without me having to explain, without me having to perform strength first. And I sat down across from him, taking a breath before telling him everything. The lie, the rehearsal, Chloe, the apartment, all of it. And he didn't interrupt once, didn't defend his brother, didn't try to minimize anything. When I finished, he leaned back slightly, his jaw tightening just enough to show what he was holding back. "I tried to help him, you know," he said after a moment, his tone controlled but firm. "I offered him a job at my company more than once, tried to get him to take responsibility, but he always refused, said he didn't want to work under me." Daniel exhaled slowly, shaking his head. The truth is, he couldn't stand being compared, and instead of stepping up, he just avoided everything. And I nodded, because that sounded exactly like Ethan, running from anything that required accountability. "What do you need from me?" Daniel asked, leaning forward slightly, his focus entirely on me, not distracted, not impatient, just present. And the question caught me off guard, because no one had asked me that in a long time. Not Ethan, not Chloe, not even my own family. They all expected things from me, but no one asked what I needed. And in that moment, I realized something simple but profound. This was what respect felt like. Not grand gestures, not promises, just being seen, heard, considered. "I need him to feel it," I said finally, my voice steady. The confusion, the loss of control, the uncertainty, everything he's been putting me through. I met Daniel's eyes, holding his gaze without hesitation. "And I need your help to do that." And he didn't look surprised, didn't hesitate, just nodded once, a small, decisive movement. "Then I'm in," he said, his voice calm but certain. "Whatever you need." And for the first time since all of this started, I allowed myself a small, controlled breath. Because now, I wasn't alone anymore. And whatever came next, it wouldn't be me reacting. It would be me choosing. I didn't rush the preparation. I treated it the way I approached the biggest cases of my career. Precise, controlled, leaving nothing to chance. Because if this was going to end, it was going to end on my terms, not in whispers behind closed doors, but in the open, where the truth couldn't be rewritten. And by the time Friday night arrived, I was ready. Not emotionally, that part had already burned out, but strategically. Every detail aligned exactly where I wanted it. The dress was new, a fitted black silk piece that fell cleanly along my frame, elegant but sharp. The kind of dress that didn't ask for attention, but demanded it anyway. My hair was styled loose for once, dark waves resting over my shoulders instead of pulled back into control. And my makeup was deliberate, not heavy, just enough to highlight the version of myself I had forgotten existed, the version that didn't shrink to make other people comfortable. And in my clutch, carefully organized, were the pieces that mattered. Printed wedding photos, timestamps, records, small things that together formed something undeniable. When I stepped outside, Daniel was already waiting by the car, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. His posture relaxed but grounded, the kind of presence that made everything around him feel steadier. And when his eyes met mine, there was a brief pause, not surprise, but recognition, like he understood exactly what this night meant without needing it explained. "You look ready," he said simply, and I nodded once, because anything more would have been unnecessary. And as I got into the car, I realized something else. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid. I was calm, in a way I hadn't been in years. The reunion was held in a hotel ballroom downtown. Bright lights, polished floors, the hum of conversations layered over soft music. People dressed to prove their lives had turned out the way they wanted them to. And as we walked in together, Daniel's hand resting lightly at my back, guiding but not controlling, I scanned the room once before I saw them. Ethan standing near the center, his arm around Chloe, both of them perfectly positioned, perfectly rehearsed. Her leaning into him, smiling at people like she belonged there, like she had always been his wife. Ethan saw me first, and the shift was immediate. His face going through confusion, then recognition, then something closer to panic, his body stiffening as his gaze moved from me to Daniel. And I watched it all happen in real time, the exact moment he realized he had lost control of the narrative. "Olivia?" he said, his voice uncertain, like he wasn't sure if I was supposed to be there. And I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Surprised?" I asked. my tone light enough to carry but sharp enough to cut through the noise around us. The people near him started to turn, attention shifting, curiosity building, and I stepped forward, closing the distance just enough to make it clear I wasn't a guest. I was the interruption they hadn't planned for. "Hi," I said, looking directly at the group around him. "I'm Olivia Carter." I extended my hand casually. "Ethan's wife." And the silence that followed was immediate, heavy. One of the men, tall, broad-shouldered, probably mid-30s, blinked in confusion. "Wait, I thought Chloe was—" he started, and I didn't let him finish. "She's my sister," I said clearly, my voice steady. "And she's been sleeping with my husband." The words landed exactly how I intended them to. Not shouted, not emotional, just factual. And the reactions spread instantly. Whispers, shifting glances, phones subtly raised. And beside me, I felt Daniel remain still, present but not intervening, letting me lead exactly the way I needed to. Chloe's face drained of colour, her hand slipping from Ethan's arm as she took a step back. "Olivia, this isn't—" she started, but I held up a hand slightly, stopping her without raising my voice. "Don't," I said, then reached into my clutch, pulling out one of the photos, holding it up just enough for the people closest to see. "This is our wedding," I added calmly. "The real one." And I watched as the carefully built version of their story collapsed, piece by piece. Because the truth doesn't need volume. It just needs to be seen. I didn't stay to watch the aftermath that night. I didn't need to, because I had already seen everything I needed to see in Ethan's face when the truth hit him. The panic, the loss of control, the realization that the version of reality he had carefully built was gone. And as Daniel and I walked out of the ballroom, the noise fading behind us, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, but space, like something heavy had finally been removed and I could breathe again without forcing it. The divorce process started the next morning, efficient, clean, handled by a colleague of mine, Mark Reynolds, a senior partner in his 40s with a reputation for being meticulous and emotionally detached, the kind of lawyer who treated cases like equations, and in this situation, that was exactly what I needed. No drama, no hesitation, just results, and within weeks, everything was set in motion. The house remained mine. The accounts were separated, and Ethan, for the first time in years, had to face a life that wasn't supported by someone else's structure. And from what I heard through mutual contacts, it didn't take long for things to unravel. Ethan lost more than the marriage. He lost the image he had spent a decade protecting. His friends stopped calling. The same people he had lied to for years no longer saw him as charming. They saw him as unreliable, dishonest, and slowly, quietly, they distanced themselves. And without that network, without me, without the stability he had taken for granted, he drifted again, only this time there was nothing left to cushion the fall. Chloe didn't fare any better. She tried to stay with Ethan at first, holding on to the version of him she believed in, but reality doesn't bend to illusions for long, and without financial support, without the comfort she had grown used to, the cracks showed quickly. Arguments over money, over expectations, over things neither of them had ever learned to manage, and eventually she left, moving back in with our mother, the same house she once ran from, but this time not as someone searching for herself, but as someone who had nowhere else to go, and I heard through Rachel that she barely left her room anymore, the weight of everything finally catching up to her. As for me, I didn't rebuild the same life. I built a different one. I left the firm 3 months after the divorce was finalized, not because I couldn't stay, but because I didn't want to. I wanted something that was mine from the ground up, so I started my own practice, smaller, more focused, choosing my clients, setting my own pace. And for the first time, my work felt like a choice, not an obligation. And with that shift came something deeper, a sense of control that wasn't about holding everything together, but about knowing I didn't have to anymore. Daniel stayed, not in a dramatic way, not with grand declarations or rushed decisions, but consistently, quietly, the way he always had. Dinners that turned into long conversations. Weekends that didn't feel planned but still meant something. He gave me space without distance, presence without pressure, and over time, something grew there. Not out of need, not out of reaction, but out of understanding, respect, and something steadier than anything I had experienced before. And 6 months later, when we stood together in a small town in Italy, the sun setting over streets I had once dreamed of visiting alone, I realized I wasn't carrying anything from my past anymore. Not the betrayal, not the anger, not even the version of myself that accepted less than I deserved. I feel free, I said quietly, more to myself than to him, and Daniel glanced at me, a small smile forming, not asking me to explain, not needing to, and as we continued walking, side by side, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just an ending, it was the first time I had ever truly chosen my own beginning. So, what would you choose? Stay and forgive, or walk away for good? Protect your family, or cut them off after betrayal? Fight for love, or choose your self-respect? If you were me, peace or revenge? Comment your answer, I really want to know. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories like this.